Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on managing A360 Collaboration for Revit. My name is John Semel. I'm the Director of IT here at Microsol Resources. I also specialize in various collaboration technologies for Revit and other products. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about certain aspects of managing A360 Collaboration for Revit. As some of you hopefully already know, this software is a cloud-based multi-site collaboration tool specifically for Revit, which basically allows people in various physical locations to work in real time simultaneously on single Revit models as well as entire projects. So I do want to say that this particular webinar today is really designed a little more for people who are already familiar with collaboration for Revit. We're not really going to do an overview of the service. We're going to assume that you've either seen some of our webinars on this topic or that you have the service at this time. This is really a little more for BIM managers and IT staff, although obviously it can be helpful for people who are AEC staffers, people who are working with the software on a regular basis. If you want, you can take a look at some of our previous webinars, which is at microsolresources.com/resources. And also, just so you know, a lot of this information is already available on our blog, blog.microsolresources.com. So the topics today, we're going to cover the underlying structure of collaboration for Revit. We're going to talk about roles and security, renaming and deleting models, how you do your regular maintenance, some basic troubleshooting, and very critical, backup strategies. By the way, I do have to just give you a little heads up that this is a little text heavy, but there's also going to be some demos as well. So you may want to take some screenshots just so you can keep track of some of the things that we're talking about. So the basic structure of collaboration for Revit is a little different than you might expect. I'm actually just going to go back 1 second. So this is the way that most people think of collaboration for Revit, as kind of having this one central cloud location that everyone is plugging into. And just as a reminder, the way that it actually works is that you've got a little piece of software on the client machines, which is basically checking in with this cloud server. However, it's really set up a little bit differently. There are 2 sets of cloud servers that you're actually dealing with. One is the collaboration for Revit servers, and the other is the A360 team servers. So when you're working in Revit, what happens is when you do a sync with Central, you're actually communicating with the collaboration for Revit servers. When you're looking at the web interface for your team hub, you're actually looking at the A360 team servers, and these 2 are communicating with each other basically using the publish function. So again, this is all pretty much invisible to the users, but if you've done things like use the publish function, you may notice that you can publish models and do things on the team site that don't wind up affecting the Revit users. And in turn, you can be working in Revit and doing certain functions that don't directly or immediately show up on the team site. So the obvious example is you could be working in Revit, you can do a sync to Central, and someone who is looking at the team interface is not necessarily going to be seeing all the changes until you do the publish function. So this actually plays into some of these features. We'll come back to the roles in a minute. Sorry about that. So one is when it comes to renaming models. Because you've got these 2 different servers, and you've got to have a way to have the changes get pushed through, and that's going to be through the publish. So let's actually do a quick little demo of that. So you'll see we're using Revit 2017, which has the first version available for Revit. It's the personal accelerator for Revit. When we open up the model, you'll see up here we have the basic sample project. The title is up here. We go into Collaborate, and let's go into Manage A360 Models. So again, this is actually really all connecting to that Collaboration for Revit server. It's not getting to the team site yet. So here we've got our sample project. Let's say O2. We go into Actions, and we do rename. So let's just call this rename. So you get this notification up here. The model has been renamed. To see this change reflected in Revit, you need to synchronize your model. So before we do the sync, let's just take a look at how it's going to come up in Team. And again, I'm already logged into my account in Revit. And here's our team site. Here's our test project. You'll see that even though we renamed it through Manage, it's still O2 here. So let's go back to our Manage. Oh, sorry, we have to do the Sync to Central. Sorry for a little bit of delay here. And while we're waiting for that, let's go in here. You'll see that there's no option to rename the project in here. Let's just move or delete. All right, I apologize for the minor technical difficulties here. You may notice, by the way, that even though we changed it, the title is not going to change until we get our Sync to Central. Okay, let's try that again. Sync to Central. All right, and hopefully this will push up to the site now. Sorry about that. Let's take a look. And G360 models, maybe there was a little technical glitch. Project 02 renamed. Okay, now let's go into here and let's publish that renamed one, and that should push up to change. Okay, sorry about that. There is a little delay. There may be some issues going on with the connections between the servers. So one thing about changing the names as well, you just also want to make sure to check your links. So just make sure that whenever you're changing the Revit name, go into any models that are linked to it and make sure that the links have changed. So deleting is a little bit of a similar situation, basically in that you have to delete it actually on both sides. You have to delete it on the Collaboration for Revit side, and you also have to delete it on the team side. And keep in mind that when you delete it on the team side, that's going to wipe out all of the published versions as well. So deleting it on the team side is, in a sense, a little more permanent, but you really have to do both in order to get it out of the cloud system completely. And even when you do that, copies are going to remain in the user's caches indefinitely. So you have to be a little aware that deleting models may not be quite as thorough as you might expect. In particular, there isn't really a way to centrally get rid of all copies. And this, in a sense, is both a result of and indicative of an aspect of Collaboration for Revit, namely that it's a fairly trusting environment. It assumes that once you've invited someone to collaborate with you, that they have the rights to do whatever they need to do, including deleting models or renaming them. So let's try just deleting a model, and here we'll go to Manage A360 Models, go to our test project. We'll take the basic sample project. This is structure 1. Delete here. We get a warning. So again, it's telling you that you can't sync changes to the model because once you take it out from this side, it's deleting it from that Collaboration for Revit server. And again, this is RST Basic Sample Project PO2. And now when we go here, it should still be here. Okay. You know, I may have to double check with Autodesk. These were not supposed to be syncing, and we tested this a few weeks ago. My apologies for slightly unexpected results with this process. So the next thing that we're going to move on to is a discussion of doing regular maintenance. One of the things that they've recently added is the ability to audit and to do a compact models when you do the sync to central. These are not previously available. So you may want to, as a regular base, perhaps once a week, do these functions. You should also make sure to do your routine maintenance. Again, you can see we have a blog page on this. I'm just going to pop that open. And this was put together by my colleague Roger Lucci. This involves a number of steps. This you may need to do perhaps once every few weeks. You may just want to take a look at this and figure out what the proper steps that you want to take on a regular basis. But at a minimum, you should be doing the audit and compact. And let's just do a quick example of that. So we're going to go to our A360 servers. We'll go to our test project. So let's open our sample 03. You'll notice that audit is something you can check. It tells you it takes a long time. At the same time, as per usual with Collaboration for Revit, detach from central and create new local are grayed out. Those are still not options. And the reason for that is because you're basically connecting to the local cache copy, and every time you hit sync to central, it's going to update that cached version with the Collaboration for Revit server. So this is just a sample project, so it shouldn't take too long. So that was pretty quick. Oh, sorry, it's still going a little bit. So again, you would probably want to do this about once a week. And once it's done, I will show you real quick where the option to compact is. It's in the usual spot with the synchronized to central. So what we would do as well, we have a recommended workflow when you're doing the more intense maintenance. And what I recommend is that you have the users do a sync to central, exit the model. Then you want to publish the model to take a snapshot of its current condition. So in the unlikely event that you need to go back to it, you have a very quick way to get to it. You want to download the published model. I would suggest renaming that model in Collaboration for Revit and Team. You can also archive it if you really need to, but I would probably just rename it. And then you can open the downloaded model, with audit and detach, do your maintenance, re-enable the cleaned up model for Collaboration for Revit using the old name. Then just check your links and do a sync to central. In terms of basic troubleshooting, You do have to keep in mind that this is still Revit, and a lot of the normal issues that you might run into will still apply. Just because it's a cloud-based model does not mean that Autodesk is doing maintenance on the models for you. You're still responsible for doing all your maintenance. So you can occasionally run into some minor issues. One of the best ways to avoid any issues to begin with, and one of the first things to check if you run into any problems, is to make sure that all users are on the same build of Revit and Collaboration for Revit. This can be a little bit of a problem just because Revit is frequently updated these days. So you might get a new update release or a patch once a month, maybe twice a month. In addition, it really is not a good idea to fall behind for several reasons. One is that they're routinely updating the various servers and the Collaboration for Revit servers. So if you fall a bit behind, it is possible that you are either missing some critical patches that you need, critical hot fixes, or sometimes what they will do is they will update the Collaboration for Revit servers, and then you have to make sure that you have the latest version to be compatible with that. We also have a blog on patch management strategies. Now, as some of you may know, especially those on the BIM management or IT side, this can be a very challenging issue, because if you have, 30, 40, 50 workstations and you all need to be patched, that's a pretty major effort. And even if you're a small firm, perhaps you have 5 or 10 people, you don't necessarily have a routine session with your IT person to keep updating your software. So there are a couple of options. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but you can find this blog and take a look at it and find some good strategies for dealing with this issue. Some other really basic things: make sure all the users have unique names. With Collaboration for Revit, this really shouldn't be a big problem, because whenever you log in to Revit, it's going to use this as your Revit username. So it's going to use that to keep track of who's got which elements out, who's working in the model at a given time. Now, Collaboration for Revit does allow the same person to log into more than one workstation at a time. And one of the reasons for this is so that it basically replicates home use. So if, for example, you have a staffer who is working at a home location, they are not necessarily tied to working on Collaboration for Revit on just one computer. They can also use it at their home office as well. So you have to make sure, though, that they are not working simultaneously using the same name. In addition to potential licensing issues, this is going to cause a lot of problems for the model, because if it thinks there's 2 people with the username Semel who are making changes in the model, it's not going to know who has which elements out, who has control of which elements, and that can cause a great deal of problems. So just watch for that and make sure to check that as well when you run into minor issues. We will also recommend that you remove CAD links. Collaboration for Revit does not sync CAD files. There are ways of using third-party options such as Dropbox, where everybody maps to the same drive letter and they use those for CAD links. But if you don't have that kind of a system set up, if you just have these orphaned CAD links, we would recommend getting rid of them. And also just check your Revit model links. That won't necessarily cause corruption, but if you have a Revit model link that is incorrect, that could cause a bit of slowdown. One thing we've noticed as well, on rare occasions, if you can't publish the model, it is possible that could be an indication that the model is having issues or that it's corrupt. However, you have to be a little careful, you have to be patient, because publishing normally can take 5 to 10 minutes. It really depends on how much traffic is going on. And again, the publishing process is just taking the latest sync to central from the A360 from the Collaboration for Revit servers and syncing it to the team servers. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the background, but if you can't publish, that may indicate that something is going on. Another thing to check, by the way, and this could be part of your regular troubleshooting or just a regular checkup, is the website health.autodesk.com. So this is the health dashboard, and let me just refresh this. So you can see here there are a lot of different cloud services, and again we have a separate line for Collaboration for Revit and for Team. This also keeps an eye on BIM 360 Field and Glue and Buzzsaw, so it lets you know what's going on. And another thing to do, you see up here there's the health subscription. We highly recommend that if you are currently using Collaboration for Revit, that you should sign up for these notifications. So that way, if there's a problem with Collaboration for Revit, you may notice that you're having trouble getting a model to sync, maybe it's taking too long, maybe you can't open it, maybe you're getting errors. Whenever you see something like that, this would be the first thing that I would check. And hopefully, if you are signed up, you will get alerts very quickly. So there have been some times when we're doing support and someone calls us up and says, hey, we're having a problem syncing our models, and then we already know that something is going on because we've gotten an email from Autodesk. They also use this to notify you of regularly scheduled maintenance. So if you start having problems with your model, a good workflow, again, you can check help.autodesk.com. That might tell you right away that your model itself is okay and that the problem is with the servers. But let's say that help.autodesk.com, everything looks green. So what we recommend is a cautious approach, which hopefully captures every phase of the model, and you roll back basically to the point where the corruption started, and from there you can start fixing things. So I'll do a quick walkthrough of this. Basically what you want to do is publish the latest version of the model and then download that. Then you can roll back to the next sync to central. So keep in mind that when you roll back just to a sync to central, which has not been published, you're going to delete all non-published versions of the model that are newer than what you're rolling back to. In addition, anyone still working in that model, their work will be orphaned, so it won't go in. So what I recommend is sort of a staged approach where you roll back, you publish it, download it, open it offline, preferably with audit and detach. If you can't open it, then you know that you've still got a problem in that particular sync to central. What we found is usually if there's a really, really serious problem, you might have to go back 3 or 4, and from there you can start cleaning up your model, checking out what's going on. Maybe there's a corrupt element or or something else, or maybe there's a bad link. So we'll just do a very quick demo of that. You go into Collaborate, go into Manage A360 Models, as we did earlier. Go into your project. So in here, you can see that I haven't published the latest. And we can view versions. We have a whole bunch. So if, for example, I roll back to version 8 from 9:42 a.m., it's going to wipe out this latest version. So even if I'm having problems with that latest one, even if I have trouble getting it open, I still think it's best to take as cautious an approach as possible. So we're just going to publish that one. Normally I go through it, but I don't want to disrupt the demo. So we would just roll back. And you'll see now they say, you're aware that all versions later than selecting version will be permanently deleted. I've notified my team members to save their changes elsewhere. And again, this should not delete any published versions, but it is good to keep in mind that there are some risks here. So we'll do a restore. And then what I would do is publish it. So this also takes us to a related concept of backing up A360 models. So one of the key aspects of a cloud service is that everything is basically stored within their systems. So, Collaboration for Revit actually uses Amazon S3, their servers in Virginia, as a backbone. And on one hand, this is an excellent option for backup because in a lot of respects you don't have to worry about it, you don't have to take any additional measures, you can rely on their systems for the most part to back up data, and chances are that even if you're a very large firm with a lot of resources, Amazon and Autodesk are going to have tools and redundancies that are not usually available to most private firms. However, as an IT person, I am always paranoid about backup, and I always think it's important to have data in more than one location at once. So we usually recommend that on a somewhat regular basis, you publish and download local copies of your models. So I'll do a walkthrough on this. It's not that complicated. The only issue is that it's also not automated. So the reason for this is that the publishing model has two functions to it. One is that it lets you download the model, but the other is that it's a way of distributing the information. So if we go in here to our sample project, as some of you may have seen, when we get to it through the web interface, we have our 3D model, which we can look at, and in turn we can share this with people. So one of the functions of the publishing is that you can give people information about the model with 3D views and sheets and a lot of information, so they don't have to have a full copy of Revit or even Revit Viewer. It's all happening right in the browser. So in some cases, you may be publishing copies of the model and distributing it to, for example, an owner or perhaps a high-level executive at the owner. So you don't necessarily want them to see all the intermediary versions. However, I find that the ability to download is usually a little bit stronger of a concern, and the need to backup is a little bit stronger of a concern than that. So normally what you can do once the models are published, you can just go in here. You've got our little download icon here. It is going to compress the items for you, and what it should do is it will then automatically start to download a zip file. And then what you can do is you can copy that zip file onto a server location in your local environment and have it catch catch it in your normal backup. Now, one thing that I've noticed on occasion is that since this is a manual process, sometimes you may have a situation where there's one person who is considered responsible for handling this task. So, for example, Jane may be an architect who's working on this project. Her job is to publish every day and to download once a week. Jane goes on vacation and she forgets to mention to someone that that someone else has to do this task while she's out of the office. And unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Again, in 9 out of 10 cases, this is really not going to be a big problem because the Collaboration for Revit servers are quite reliable. However, there are some occasions where you may have an issue of corruption, and usually it's handy to have a publish that you can very easily download instead of having to scroll through all those distinct centrals. And if that doesn't get done, it can be a little bit of a, it can slow down your restore process. So if you have one person who is responsible for handling this task, you should make sure that person knows, stay on top of it, and to let their BIM manager, IT staff, whoever it is, do this function on a regular basis when they're out. So there's one last thing that I wanted to talk about, and then we can take some questions, answer some questions, which is team roles and project contributors. So again, as I mentioned earlier, collaboration for Revit is a relatively trusting environment. And as you can see, we have a number of different projects here. And usually what you want to do is make sure that you have a little bit of control over who's accessing what. Now, again, this is not a granular system. It's a relatively open system, and once you invite someone to a project, then they can see everything in the project. They can download any models that are in the project. They can open any models in the project if they have collaboration for Revit. They can delete, they can rename, and they can share it out with other people. So as a result, it's good to be as circumspect as possible about who has access to what projects. So one role is called a team member, and a team member can basically see any open projects. So even if it's someone who's in your firm, I would be reluctant to use the team member function at all. What I would normally do is have perhaps one or two people, IT person, BIM manager, who are team administrators, who can do things like create projects and invite people. But for the most part, even if it's a staffer, I would go for inviting people to a specific project, and that way you make sure that it's a little bit segregated. And you also have to make sure that when someone leaves the project, it's a good practice to remove them as a project member. And we can go in real quick and take a look at the admin section. So you can see you have the option to allow project contributors access. You can basically decide who can approve. And here we have some roles, so you can see who some people are. You can usually change someone from a project contributor to a team member and vice versa. But for the most part, you want to try and keep people as project contributors. So I think that's it for our presentation today. And hopefully you will find these tips useful in terms of managing collaboration for Revit, learning how to work with it, learning how to optimize it for your office. And if you're using it, just a few things to keep an eye on to make sure that everything runs smoothly.